A Yud Beis Tammuz, to remember, a very special one, was Tov Shin Chai. For me personally, Tezayin was the first time I was ever there, and the next morning, as I mentioned, I went to camp with Rabbi Lazar. I was a counselor that year also. In Yud Zayin, I was in camp, and the Rebbe came on Tes Vav Tammuz. In Tov Shin Chai, I was already in Montreal, and that was one of the 4 times of the year that we could come in, which was Yud Shvat, Pesach, Yud Beis Tammuz, and Tishrei. And it was a reiche Farbrengen that year, Tov Shin Chai, Purim, things, but the Rebbe said a maimah, Mi Mono Afar Yaakov. It was a long maimah about Afar Ofer. And the Medrash on Chayodim Adla Ofer. The idea of Ofer, it's not like Choil, which is separate Gargidim, but Ofer is one gush, it's Achdus, but the Yodim Adla Ofer, they are Makayim Ufaratzta. And that was in the Maimeh, it had about Ufaratzta. In the Sichos, in the Farbrengen itself, the Rebbe very strongly pushed the concept of Ufaratzta. It was a very big kiruv about expanding Moisdus. There was a lot there of kiruvim for Reb Moshe Gorkov Shlita, that who had gone Mesiras Nefesh to make a Shalah, to make a release time in Boston at the time. And the Rebbe spoke about everyone doing Ufaratzta, and he said at some stage in the Farbrengen that everyone should call out, scream out, Ufaratzta 3 times. Ufaratzta, like everyone together. It was a very big high from that whole Farbrengen. And anyone can see, today you can hear the tapes and see it. I'm just saying it from memory. Incidentally, on a very personal level, I have 2 younger brothers, Chaim, who passed away last year in Ov, and Luzi Zeb Ben Yenta, you should have a 4. And they were like, they're 3 years and 4 years younger than me. So Chaim was then 15 and Luzi was 14. And they came to the Farbrengen, and I brought them up to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe gave each of them a piece of cake. And I was a Tomim already. And the Rebbe gave me a piece of cake. And he smiled and he said, "Das kriegst du im Zehe Zuchos." You're getting that in their merit. Anyway, that Farbrengen, there was a very big high. My brothers wasn't there till the end, obviously. And the end must have been 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, whenever. The Oilam in Crown Heights then, the Chassidim, was basically the Russian Oilam. Some Polishes, a few Americans. I wouldn't believe there were even 75 families living in Crown Heights of Chabad. There were thousands of Fruma Yidden, or Orthodox Jews across the spectrum, and probably tens of thousands of Stam Yidden, go 3 times a year to shul. And not everybody had air conditioning, and there was such a high that after the Farbrengen, about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, whenever it was, we were outside, and there was a spontaneous rikud. Sang a niggin, there was no niggin for us to them, just sang a freilich niggin. It must have been maybe 25 people, 30 people, getanzt. And suddenly, a police car came. And the policeman came out and he said, "What's going on over here?" So, the Chassidim were reluctant to say the Rebbe went out of jail. What do you mean? What kind of Rebbe you have? But, so one of them got the language. They said to him, "It's the birthday of one of our rabbis, today. That's why we're celebrating." So, the policeman said, "You mean every time one of you guys has a birthday, we're going to have to put up with this?" Anyway, that's Lebos Yalohoyer. And from that Farbrengen, the word Ufaratzta crept into the language of Lubavitch, number 1. What you call today a shlichus or a mifza was then called Ufaratzta. Even in Tavshel Lamed Hey, when I got the answer to become the headmaster of the girls' high school, the Achroi for the girls' high school in London, and the Rebbe said, Limsoil HaKoisev, which was Rabbi Sudak, Olav Shalom, V'Shmuel Lu, Shahahatzo'o Nochoina. That was the answer. And Rabbi Chadakov wanted to give it over to both of us together, since the Rebbe said to give over to both of us. But I was out speaking that night. And the next day I called, Rabbi Sudak told me Rabbi Chadakov wants to talk to you, so I called him up, and he told me the answer, and he said, the Rebbe must have asked whether he gave it over. He said, ich hab dir Maske given letov, ich hab gesagt, as du bist auf ein ufaratster. In other words, the word ufaratster was a word for a pu'ula, and generally, Chabad was associated, Adayam Hazeh, but then, even more strongly, Yotes, Chav, those earliest years after the Rebbe, after this Farbrengen, and there was later in the summer, there was a Maimah, Havoyah Zaracha, in Ov. And, I remember in Montreal, I heard from one of the older Bachrim, it might have been Rav Pinyakov, Yedidi, or somebody who was in a shul to speak the first night of Yud Kislev, and the Rav said that is, the Lubavitcher Rebbe is so great, that is Maimorei Chazal, and that he gave us, and even Psukim he gave us. In other words, there were Maimorei Chazal that existed, but no one really perceived what this really is saying. And he gave an example, the Pasuk Ufaratzta. We read it every year in the Torah. Nobody ever saw it. And the Rebbe, it became not just a slogan, it became a reality, b'maaseh b'poel. A good Shabbos, a good Yom Tiv, for your Beis Tammuz, Mzol Zendi Ufaratzta b'poel, Yalla Apoides, L'fnei HaMashiach, Tzidkeinu b'Kodev Mamash. Apologies for the break, for the delay or whatever. I'd like to start again Zichronos ubehekdim, since this is the Yom HaMasmuchim, the day after Yud Dalet Kislev, Yom HaBohir, and the Rebbe defined this day as the day was hat mich gebunden zu euch. This is the day which bound me to you and you to me. And because of it, we exhaust ourselves for the love and the benefit of each other, etc. What is the meaning that this is the day that bound us to you? This is just my own personal thoughts, and I'm sure many other people think of this. If you look at it in a very superficial way, the Rebbe is saying that this is the day that I became a member of the family of the 6th Nasi Chabad, of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and therefore 21 years later, the Rebbe was the next in that dynasty. But the Pashtasdika words, if you say, this is the day which connected me to you, it means from that day. And I want to suggest that the Rebbe in the years of the Tzaddiks and the Tafshins, the 1930s and the 1940s, did certain aspects of leadership of Chabad, which till this day have a very powerful influence on us. The Hainu, meaning, in the Tafresh Tzaddiks, there was the Hatomim, which was a magazine that came out, and later it was published as a Sefer. This was the repository of all inyanim of Chabad and many things of Chabad. The Rebbe's name doesn't appear there, but it turns out during the trial of the Sforim that the Rebbe was actually the editor of the whole project, the main editor, and caused things there, which was all the information. During this time, the Rebbe did a lot of clarification for us about the Minik Chabad in Tfilas, in Haftoides, in various other areas, things which are to this day, they unify Chabad. It's a powerful thing. I've heard from people who are not Chabad that they envy the clarity that if you're in Chabad, you know exactly what your minig is in every situation, And this is because of the work which the Rebbe did then, and in the Tafshins, with the Hayom Yom, which is that is the book that gives us the guidance in both in Avodah and also in the Minhagim and Uschois. Also, as far as Yeshivas Tamchet Mimim is concerned, which the Frierdiker Rebbe put the Shag, the other son-in-law, he was eminent Chosid, not a Rebbe, but even in those years, in the Tafresh Tzadiks, you have the Fabrenians of the Rebbe with the Bachrim, which are now in the Rishimas, mostly Simchas Beis HaSha'eva, the Rebbe's input there in the yeshiva, and even more in the letters of the Frierdiker Rebbe, to the correspondence between the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, in Chelek Tes Vav 15 of the letters, the Igus Kodesh of the Frierdiker Rebbe, you find that many things where the Frierdiker Rebbe asked the Rebbe to clarify and to do shlichusin and various aspects of mosquitoes, but I'm talking specifically about the Rebbe should be the one, or at least one of the ones, or maybe the main one, who would interview the Rosh Yeshiva who was later became a great Rosh Yeshiva in Latvotsk. It was the Rebbe who interviewed him, and the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted to hear the Rebbe's assessment of him for that position. So, and similarly, when it came to Tafshin Yud or Tafshin Yud Aleph, people say the Rebbe is the Rebbe since Tafshin Yud Aleph. The Rebbe was makabel in the Siyas in Tafshin Yud Aleph, but he was leading in Tafshin Yud from Yud Shvat. I have a copy of a photocopy of a letter, it's not with me here now, where the Rebbe writes about, it's an English letter, and the Rebbe writes about the moisdus that he takes responsibility for, and he writes B'Ksavyat Kodesh in the margin on the side of the letter, since Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud. The word since in English, and then it says Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud, and all some of the key shlichusin took place in that year, and the Rebbe was certainly eating what the Rebbe considered the go-ahead milmaila to say Maimorim and whatever else for Kabbalas and Asiyas, but the leadership, and to say that the Rebbe, this is the day which connected me to you and you to me, I think that it refers to from Yudalit Kislev on and to this very day. Everyone knows that on Tes Zayin Sivan Tov Shin Lamed Hey, the Rebbe said a sicha about the printing of the Tanya and the translation into English, and about parting Al Yipot Odom Mechaveroi and distributed Tanyas. It was a Gilui Or Otzum. There were people who were in cars and they thought that this was his galus, and parked and ran right over. Not that many people know the story behind that story and the Rebbe's involvement. And what I want to speak about in this voicemail is the story behind that Gilui. There was a family who were Niskarev here in Stamford Hill. They lived not far from Lubavitch house, around the corner, and their 3 children went to Lubavitch school, and somehow they didn't remain observant. It was maybe too much for them. They weren't hostile in any way, but they just were not keeping the mitzvahs as before. They had a daughter and 2 sons, and I'll speak about the daughter. She remained 100% loyal. The children were all in Lubavitch school, and keeping kosher and keeping Shabbos. The family did what they did, but she would eat school meals and found a way during the week. And for Shabbos, every Friday night, she would eat with us, with our family. And every Shabbos day, she would eat with the family of Rebbe Shagalov, a major supporter and Baal Tzedakah and Chassidish Yid, Olav Shalom. So I would walk her home at the end of the evening, Friday night, just as a Maimah Muskwa. This is a small digression. One Friday night, Rabbi Zichronos was staying with us. Olav Shalom, this is in the Lameds, maybe around Tov Lamed, before Rabbi Tzvi Telsner, his son-in-law, and his wife came here. And at the end, I said to Rabbi Zichronos, I have to walk this girl home now, so I'll be back in about 10 to 15 minutes. It's a 5, 6, 7 minute walk. He said, I'm coming with. And so we walked together, and I used to drop her off just across the street. It was a narrow street, like Union Street in Crown Heights. And I would drop her off just opposite the house across the street. And so Rabbi Yitzchak asked me, why do you drop her off here? I said, because it reminds me of when we were Bachrim and we walked the Rebbe. We used to walk behind the Rebbe 15 feet or so. And you would go on President Street on the odd number side, opposite 1304, and watch the Rebbe go into the house. And then the Rebbe would appear at the window and lock the window. I'm not sure if it was locking the window or a signal to us that he's okay and everything's okay. And then we would leave. And this was every day until Tov Shechov Hey, the Rebbe began to go. The default position was going by car. Until then, it would be during the week as well, most nights. And every week there was 2 Bachrim that were told, you're on this week. So Zichronos did not know this whole thing exists. He was like, he said, what happened? Who arranges it? Who decides which Bachrim are going? I said, it's Chassidish Bachrim. And they have a list probably. I said, when they told me to go, then I went. He said, Chassidish Bachrim. That's who decides it. And he said, I'll tell you a story of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov said, he asked L'mayla, who am I going to be next to in Gan Eden? And they gave a name of some Yid, and he went to seek out this Jew, and he sees, he's a big, fat, obese person, and he stayed with him for a few days, and he saw that this man for breakfast has a couple of loaves of bread with meat, with 20 eggs, really, really eating a lot. And the Baal Shem Tov realized if he was told Milmaila, this man is special, then he's obviously special. There must be a tzaddik nista, there must be some kavanah. And he sees the person looks like a Pashto Yid. He said, what's your story? Tell me the main stations of your life. And he told him that one of the things he said was he's 9 years old, or a little boy, and he was going with his father in a forest, and some bandits got a hold of them. And they tied the father to a tree, and they said, we're going to kill you because otherwise, you're going to expose us. And they said, but we'll let you go if you agree to Shmadzich, Rahmanul Islam. And he refused, of course, and he died al Kiddush Hashem. He said, they lit a fire, and my father was a skinny little Jew, and within 1 minute, he was gone. And I made a hachlota right then and there that when I get killed, al Kiddush Hashem, they're not going to have such an easy time getting rid of my body. And so I eat a lot, and to make sure that I'm big. And so the Baal Shem Tov understood that this person is not just eating l'shem shemayim, he's being moistened nefesh al Kiddush Hashem with every bite that he takes. That's his kavanah. So Rabbi Zichronos said, that's the kind of a bacha you need. Some big, powerful guys, not good look. The criterion to protect the Rebbe should not be chassidishkeit, it should be strength. It reminded me of a tzattel where the Rebbe wrote, I think it was when, Menachem Begin came, and the Rebbe wrote 2 sides, a very detailed list of how the arrangement should be made, and I think he mentioned about Bachrim, Shegvurosam, something about their Gvura. Anyway, so this girl, that's the end of the Maimah Musge. So this girl then was in Shidduchim, she went to seminary, then she was in Shidduchim, and it was not going so well, and in Shavuos Tafshin Lamed Dalet, my wife was there with our youngest infant son, and her father, Reb Zalman Jaffe, and so that girl was also there, and part of the group from England that was there. And while she was there, she asked the girl, tell me, what are you looking for? What kind of a person do you want with a shidduch? Everything didn't work. So she said, I want someone like Shmuel Arkush. This story is known. She said this story in public. And he was there. So my wife is very, very, Baruch Hashem, and I know, very, very smart and very good-hearted, but she's also, and especially, Balas Maisa, very practical, down-to-earth doer. And she went straight to her father, Zalman, even though he lived in Manchester, the girl lived in London. He said, I want you to fix up this girl with this bacha. And he dismissed it. It was on the steps of 770. He was going in to have his yichidus that night. And either he didn't think he was capable, or it was practical, or it was not for him. We ourselves had not made shidduchim before then. And he went into yichidus, and out of the blue, I don't think this happened any other time, the Rebbe said to him, you know that girl, I want you to set a shidduch up for her, and I will personally give you shatchonis. I'll pay you shatchonis for making that shidduch. And then my shver came out, and he looked for my wife, and he said, wait a minute, tell me, what was about that boy again? And I'm not sure if they met there in New York or when, but within a couple of weeks, that summer, within that month, by Tammuz, Tavshin Lamed Daled, they were engaged, Baruch Hashem, they're shluchim, running a city, and have lovely children living in America. And my shver sent the Rebbe a telegram saying she's engaged, and I'll let you know when I want the shatchonis. The next part, which is the story behind the story, I will do on a different voice note. During the Shnas Ha'avelus Le'oleinu, I did ask the Rebbe about Kaddish, and I'll mention 2 of the occasions, which I shared with Rabbi Danov. First was in that summer, my mother passed away Erev Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and in Rosh Chodesh Elul, beginning of Elul, my wife's brother, Rabbi Avram Yosef Yaffe Shlita, he's a rabbi in Manchester, and a very, an Askin. He was then getting married in Manchester. So I asked the Rebbe whether my in-laws wanted us to come. So I asked the Rebbe a separate question. Should my wife and child, our son Yossi, was born on Yudalet Sivan, Tavshin Chav Daled, and so he was just going to be like 2 months old, or 2.5 months old when we traveled. Should my wife and him go, and should I go to that wedding? My question about myself was because of my status as a novel, going especially for a wedding. And the Rebbe answered on the zettel. I don't think I have the Lashon, I don't know where it is, but the Rebbe said that we should all go, be'im, the Reife Yelodim, if the baby doctor says that the child can travel, then you should all go. And he gave a bracha subsequently, V'yehei kol zeh b'ratzu v'shuv b'atzlacha. So, and I should mention here that at the Farbrengen Chof Ov, Tov Shin, Chof Dalid, the Rebbe called me up. This was a week or so before we went, and he gave me a bottle of mashka, which I did not shtel, and the Rebbe told me that I should Fernanda tell a little bit at this Farbrengen, and some at the Chasana from the Shvaga, and the Chasana from Weissfish. Rabbi Aaron Weissfish was getting married in Manchester to Miss Halpern that summer, and the Rebbe gave me mashke, so I became a mashamish, and al pi halacha, there's no question, the mashamish goes to a wedding, even if Leilenu he is a novel. There was actually a third wedding. It's fascinating. There were 3 separate Lubavitch Chasnas within a few weeks that summer in Manchester. The third one was Yedidenu Rebbe Sion Eliezer Hakna, who passed away Yud Beis Nisan, Tavshin Pei, from COVID. The Rebbe did not mention him when he gave me the mashke, so I did not go to that wedding. I went to the chuppah, and I made an appointment at the dentist or whatever. But this is just a Maimah HaMuska, parenthetically saying about what the Rebbe did about the mashke. Now, I was concerned about the Kadeshim, the Mispah HaKadeshim. You're supposed to say a certain number of Kadeshim every day. 18 Kadeshim, each one gives a menucha for an hour and a half, Hatzalah for the neshama. And if I would travel to Manchester in the middle of the summer, it means I would be going overnight before Shkia, the plane would be going, and I'd be missing the Tefillah B'tzibah of Ma'ariv, and very possibly Shachris. In the event, I missed Shachris as well. So I wrote to the Rebbe, I said, what should I do? He said, Shaila L'Rav. I said, and what I wrote, I'm concerned about missing the Kadeshim. So the Rebbe said, Ze Efsha Al Yidei Sheyashlim B'Meshech HaMe'esles Ba'Anglia. This idea of having the number of Kadeshim, you can work out by saying Kaddish in the course of the Mesles and the course of that day, as it is in England. And in the end, I needed it even to make. I don't think I got the full number altogether. I found out which every shul went what time to have a mincha. I asked them permission to say a Kaddish D'Rabbanan before and a Kaddish D'Rabbanan after Aleinu, and went to a few shuls. The chiddush was that there was one shul, a very, very Yakasha shul, like Shelton Crescent, for those who know. And the time for mincha was like 7:32, it said. And 7:30, there was not a single person there. And 7:31 to 32, all the people turned up, and they allowed me to say an extra Kaddish D'Rabbanan, or Hashem. Another thing I asked the Rebbe that year about Kaddish was the last Shabbos Mevorchim, Od Sheni, Tavshin Chof Hei. I was going to upstate. I think it was maybe Ithaca, to Cornell University, or to to Syracuse. I was going to I think it was to Cornell for a Shabbos, Shabbaton, and I was in Yechidus because my Yom Haledes is Chof Oda, and I asked the Rebbe about I might settle in Yechidus about the Kadeshim of the Tehillim before davening. I didn't factor in that I might have a problem with all the normal Kadeshim in the whole situation in the university or Hillel, whatever. And the Rebbe answered. He said the Kadeshim Fatilim. He said something like, it sounded like he wanted to say something and maybe didn't finish the sentence, or maybe he did, on reflection, maybe he did finish the sentence, but what the Rebbe did say is that you could make up those. It sounded like he wanted to say that if you miss those, you missed them. But he didn't say that. He just said, those Kadeshim, and then it sounded like he started again. It said, those Kadeshim, you can compensate by saying a Kaddish de Rabbanon, Fa Shachris noch Shachris, Fa Mincha, Fa Ma'ariv noch Ma'ariv. He's not in the order of the tefillahs. He told me several times to do it before each tefillah and after each tefillah to make up the numbers. And that order that the Rebbe told me, it became very relevant in order to make up the normal number of Kadeshim for that Shabbos in the Shlichus that we were there that upstate. Another word about a story, actually it's around from this time of the year. There was a Yid in Manchester who was called Aubrey Harris. I forgot what his Hebrew name is. And it was a former Yid, but not Chabad. And my Shve knew him, Reb Zalman Jaffe, and he was married a few years, had no children. And my Shve told him right to the Rebbe. So certainly wrote in, the doctors had said that the reason that she could not fall pregnant was because they were keeping Taras HaMishpacha, because of various inyanim connected to the dinim. If they were not kept exactly, totally, there would be a bigger chance of conceiving. And he wrote this to the Rebbe, and he asked for a bracha, and the Rebbe wrote back like a whole letter that said that keeping the halacha certainly is not chas v'shol. That's not something which would stop a person from being able to have Zarach Chaya v'Kayoma and Adarabba. And then there was a P.S. on the letter. You should investigate whether when you got engaged there was any person who felt insulted or forgotten or was somehow or another hurt and be misaken it. So he went to an old teacher of his, and the shadchan had been paid, but there were people along the line that people asked for references, and one of them would be the teacher. So who was a very choshev Yid, and they went to the Yid, and they went to this Yid, and asked him if he had any hard feelings or anything like that, and he said definitely not. Maybe his wife did, and they went to the wife, and she said, she had a minor, felt left out somehow because she had given a reference, but 100% was Michael long ago. Never, and he didn't even remember the whole story. But they gave her some gifts, some fruit, some flour, whatever it was. They did something, and 9 months later to the day, they had the first child. And my wife told the story tonight at a little fabrengen here in Crown Heights, with the family we're staying with, and I added at the moment that a few years later, this Mr. Harris, he came a few times on the planes, on the charter planes with my Shver, and he showed the Rebbe pictures of his 2 children, and the Rebbe took it and was very happy and put it in his drawer. So this man, didn't know the whole protocol. He said, that's the only copy I've got. So the Rebbe said, you have the children. And he kept the pictures in his own holy drawer. That's the story. And there's a lot you can learn from being mizboinen in it. A little bit about the Chasana Tesvav Tammuz Tovshin Chav Gimel. I was in Yechidus for my Yom Haledes in Oder Tovshin Chav Gimel, and asked the Rebbe what hachonos to make, and the Rebbe said basically the Chol Roish learning the halachas hatzrichos. Most important to learn the necessary halachas, but it's early now, and you should consult mashpiyim who were in, it's in Yiddish, he said, who were in Lubavitch, who were in Tomchet Mimim, in Lubavitch, in Kremenchuk, and maybe Artvat. He mentioned a few cities, including Lubavitch and Kremenchuk. I asked Eltere Bochrim, or Jungelite, and they said that the one that's most likely to have been in the places that Rebbe mentioned was of Shmuel Levittin, and I asked him, and he said, learn 6 to 8 weeks before, start learning. Before the Chasana, I was in Yechidus with my Kala, that was Hey Tammuz, Tavshin Chav Gimel. I think I've mentioned this before, and the Rebbe asked why the chuppah is so late, and I didn't know, and he said I'll speak to my Shver, my Mechutin. And here the Rebbe added an important hachana. The Rebbe said I should learn Reishis Chochma, Shara Kedusha, Perik Zayin, and Yud Zayin. I know he told us to many Chasanim, but he told me that I should learn it every day, part of it. I should learn of that every day, on Endigen Zuntig. In other words, the day of the wedding. And then Kivayochel, he corrected himself. He said, just in case, you should end on Motzei Shabbos. In other words, it should be learning part of it every day of those 10 days till the Chasana. And first he said Sunday, and then he said Motzei Shabbos. Obviously, and Sunday I learned the last few lines again. Another interesting thing in that Yechidus is that the Rebbe asked me, when trachst du fahren auf ein Oyhel? When are you planning to go to the Oyhel? Now in those days, people didn't really go that often to the Oyhel, as far as I know, but the whole Oilam that was like a minig was obviously Erev Rosh Hashanah, Yud Shvat, and Yud Beis Tammuz. Those were the 3 times everybody went to the Oyhel. There were people who went. We know that Zalman Duchman, for example, went very often. After Simchas Torah, he would go and sing the new niggin that the Rebbe taught Simchas Torah, for example, to the Frierdiker Rebbe. But the Rebbe asked me, when am I going? And I wasn't such a chacham to ask the Rebbe, when should I go? So I said, I said in Yiddish, I'm planning to go when everybody goes, Yud Beis Tammuz. And should I go also on the Yom HaChuppah? Is that the right thing? And the Rebbe said yes, to go on the Yom HaChuppah to the Oyhel. In that Yechidus, the Rebbe also said a bracha at the end to us, and I share it. I know the Rebbe told it maybe to other people, and I share this with everybody who is married, or is a chosin, or is going to be a chosin, or a kala. The Rebbe said, Zol sein a warme, lichtige Stub für sich und a warme, lichtige Stub für jenem. May your home be one that is warm and radiant for yourselves and warm and radiant for other people. A number of people asked me to do a voice note on the Rebbe's Shita in Chinuch. And it's really going on for 6 months. I'm not qualified to speak on that. I'm not a bucky on that. What I can do is share experiences, personal, and an answer which I got from the Rebbe, and many other answers, and things which I derive, things to factor in, things to think about. Today, I gave a talk this morning in the Yom Limud we have. It's pretty long. The main reason I never did even my thoughts is because it's hard to gather them together, but Rabbi Tali Lowenthal recorded it, and I'm going to share it to anyone who wants to listen. It's probably the better part of an hour. Generally speaking, when you ask what's the Rebbe's Shita and Chinuch, there are two areas. One is schools. What kind of a school are you going to create? And that has to do with the whole situation in the community and pre-existing Mosdis that might be there, not Chabad or yes Chabad, whatever is there. Everything you have to take into consideration. Obviously, the best, the most ideal is Kol HaYom, an Ohel Torah type, and which really gives a fantastic chinuch and a fantastic attitude and a knowledge as well. And even though we've met many adults who are very, very happy they were there for many reasons, but they feel maybe the chinuch was less. I personally have met people from Eretz Yisrael, from France, from Belgium, from England, and from America, from New York, who sort of were happy, but very often it's because the Kodesh curriculum itself could be more imaginative and more engaging, more wider, not just taking up time of the same subject, but like Siva, which the Rebbe writes to Reb Nissen, that they should have Ksiva every day, for example, and various other skills and subjects within Limud Kodesh. But that would be the ideal. That's the best. The situation is when someone is setting up a school, you have to take into consideration, are you going to build that kind of a school? Are you going to build a school for Chassidim, which is not totally Kodesh? Is it going to be for a nash? Is it going to be for a community school? And that community school, depending on the community, might be in a place which is very remote, and there's hardly, any children in the school who don't have parents or grandparents that are not even Jewish. And how you exactly organize the curriculum, it needs a tremendous amount of knowledge, and it needs amount of consultation with Rabbanim, with Chassidim and Mechanchim who have a lot of experience. The second area is the area of a parent choosing what's right for their child, and both the school, what you have to set up. And in some places, the Rebbe said exactly, here in England, there were many, in Australia, in Detroit, the different types in each place, but had direct Torahs. But whether it's a school or it's the child, the most essential thing is to work out what is the situation, what is the matzav. There is a sefer, Klolei Chinuch V'Hadracha of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and I believe that the 17 prakim, the vast majority are talking about the Torah, the Or does not change. Torah lo tohem mechlefes. But exactly how to apply it and how to be most effective has to take into consideration the keli, the horse, and the matzav of the makabel. So if anybody is interested in, I don't know the quality of the tape, but I'm going to send that, Beline, to forward it, and that's my contribution for the moment about the Rebbe's Shita on Chinuch and schooling. L'chvoid Yud Beis Tammuz, I'd like to share something which I heard when I was in Torah V'das. That means either in Tavshin Tes Zayin or Tavshin Yud Zayin. And I was coming closer and identifying with Lubavitch, and we had a principal whose name was Rabbi Alexander Lynchner. He was also the founder of Boys Town, Jerusalem, a famous person. We never saw him really, the principal. The assistant principal would run the school. Rabbi Quinn, who was born with a bracha of the Rebbe Rashab for Limud Kodesh, and Rabbi Lana, who was also a Choshev Yid for Limud Choil. And from time to time, you would see Rabbi Lynchner, and once, I don't remember how often, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, he would speak in an assembly. So I remember an assembly where, in the middle of everything he said, he mentioned that he was with the Chafetz Chaim over the border between Russia and Poland, and the Chafetz Chaim looked across the border and he said, millions of Yidden are there, and they're all on the places, on the shoulders of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, meaning the Rebbe Rayat, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And I never really shared this. Over the years, I thought about it and I remembered it. And then I started thinking maybe my memory played games with me, but it's extremely unlikely because it was significant. I don't remember a word he said when it was, except that sentence, because I was beginning to see myself as close to Lubavitch at least. Not Lubavitch maybe, but very one of Lubavitcher people. And therefore I took very strong notice that he said such a word. Fast forward about 11 or 12 years ago, I was asked to give a farbrengen for Yud Beis Tammuz on the internet for Detroit. And it was generally on the internet, so I mentioned that story. And I was contacted by email by a granddaughter of this Rabbi Lynchner, who became Lubavitch with her husband, Chosh of a family, and she said she never heard that story. She heard, a lot of stories from her grandfather about the Chofetz Chaim, but didn't hear that, and we went back and forth. To me, that sort of verified it, because it meant that it wasn't because she said it couldn't have been, because this happened, that happened. She said it because she didn't hear it. But I did hear it. And then last year in Yud Beis Av, my brother, Alav Shalom Chaim ben David, passed away on his 79th birthday, and at the Shiva came a grandson of this Rabbi Lynchman, and a different family, and I spoke with him about it, and he told me that he knows that Rabbi Lynchman was not just somebody. If he says something from the Chofetz Chaim, it's actually very close. He was like the Bacha, the Hoizbacha, like Schallenberg Ansberg, if I'm allowed to say such a thing. But he was somebody who looked after the Chofetz Chaim and went with him different places, and he was very close with him. So if the Chofetz Chaim said it, it could have been he said it. So that's a word about Yud Beis Tammuz, and I will just add a word which I already said on a voicemail, is that when Camp Gan Yisrael began in Tavshin Tez Zayin, and it's known that the Rebbe went there in Tez Zayin Tammuz, in Ellenville, the very first ever Gan Yisrael, after the Farbrengen Yud Beis Tammuz Tavshin Tez Zayin, which was the 7th Farbrengen that I ever attended, Rabbi Moshe Lazar, an old Yidid, and the person because of whom I'm here to a large extent, and he came to me after that, Rabbi was at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and he said that the Rebbe wants there should be a minyan, that the camp should begin on Yud Beis Yud Gimel Tammuz. That Friday was Yud Gimel Tammuz. We went with his pickup truck that Friday morning, and we had the minyan. We had a meal, gebench mitakos. We had Tosh Bracha, and that was the official. The unofficial official opening, because the Rebbe himself came, and that became obviously the official opening of Gan Yisrael. So Zayin Afreil Chag Geula, and don't forget Boy V'Shalom Gam B'Simcha V'Tzohola, wie der Rebbe gesagt. The Rebbe didn't answer that particular in writing, but the Rebbe said a sicha. Our son Yossi would know the exact year. It was in Chalamoid Sukkos. The Rebbe said, I think it was probably Mem Zayin approximately, that the Teuchen of what the Rebbe said was that looking for a Rav who is acceptable is Ocham Vei. It's like that's a negative thing, presumably because that person could be manipulated or would be too diluting or too taking into consideration, whatever. So a person, I would sum up from the above, that a Rav should be someone you look up to and you respect, not somebody who is mechuyev to respect you as a son to a father, and it should be someone, this I say from my experience with many, many young people, boys and girls, somebody who you can trust to be confidential, and even more important, just as important, to be non-judgmental. And that's important for us as parents, as teachers, or chavedim, whatever. When somebody confides in you, they are also implicitly, even if you're not their Rav, they're also asking for some guidance or encouragement, and it's vital not to be judgmental. That's why we need mashpiyim, people you can be candid with and trust that you can say what you have to say. There was a third question about giving some Zichronos of Tishrei by the Rebbe, Rosh Hashanah. I don't see it happening before Rosh Hashanah. I said I would try to do a few nekudas, some very personal things that I saw and not known at all, and some others about each of the Yom Tovim. I will believe to try to do it over the next weeks. One thing I will do on a separate voice note about the Rebbe Tzimchana, whose yahrzeit is Vav Tishrei, so that's one of the days and it relates directly to the question of how to be mekusher to the Rebbe in a time where the method is not something that we were used to, and it could be challenging for all of us, whatever age. And with Tzam Gedalia, it is an element of Tzam Gedalia in the following story, which happened with our son, Rabbi Yossi, the Bechor. Ubehekdim, the Rebbe's dedication and involvement and total focus with everything he did, even something which would seem to be shigra, which just seemed to be a routine thing, like signing a letter, a form letter, a Mazel Tov letter. There's the famous story with the Chasanim who were discussing, does the Rebbe really know who we are? Is he aware who he's signing for? There's so many Chasanim, there's so many other simchas going on. And when it came to Yechidus, Klolis, and when he went by, one of the Bachrim, some said, of course he knows, and some said, generally yes. One said it's impossible. And to this Bacha who said it's impossible, when they had the Yechidus Klolis, he went by, and the Rebbe said, I signed your letter yesterday. Did you pick it up in the Merkez? So, and Rabbi Yoel told this story. I heard it from Rabbi Yoel. And he said that one time he told it somewhere, and a young man came over with him and he said, in case you ever doubt that story, it happened with me. And it's 100% accurate. Another thing, if you notice, the Michtavei Bracha, so they were printed, the Toifis was printed, the form, and the name was printed in, and the Rebbe would sign, and sometimes the Rebbe added a word, to Panas Kabel, or Ksiva Toma, whatever. If you look carefully, I've seen many, you can see the Rebbe's pen mark in the printed part, the part which is identical on every single one. And the pen is the same color as the pen that he's signing that letter. A little tiny dot, or a comma. It looks like the Rebbe was went over every word with the pen as he was reading it, it would seem. Now here's the story with Rabbi Yossi. It was tough. We were walking, he and I, it was one of the nights of Sukkot or Shabbos Chalamoid on Brooklyn Avenue, just walking and talking. And Yossi said I had a very embarrassing experience on some Gedalia. He wrote into the Rebbe on Erev Rosh Hashanah a letter saying that his wife is expecting, as Noig see them right, and ask for a bracha. And that's what many of the Rebbe's Michtavim of Anvinchen. So he wrote to the Rebbe, my wife is expecting, and the due date is approximately Chamisha Osa B'Ov. He meant to write Chamisha Osa B'Shvat, and that son was Takabon on Yud Beis Shvat, but he wrote Yud Beis Chamisha Osa B'Ov. I didn't realize it. And then Rabbi Grona, his mechutin subsequently, Rabbi Grona told him that he walked into the Rebbe on some Gedalia, and the Rebbe picked up the letter and said, "Vi ken sein, it's doch 10 Chadoshim. How could this be? It's 10 months from now. How could he say my wife is expecting?" So Yossi went and checked on his draft, and he sort of made the same mistake, the slip of the pen on the draft. And so I said, it might sound embarrassing. I said, this is the most unbelievable, fantastic thing. Because just imagine that in Tafshin Mem Tes, they put out a sefer about the Rebbetzin called Kol Yemei Chayeha, like a big book, like a coffee table book about the Rebbetzin, and around the borders of every page were small snapshots of all the girls that were named after her in the year from Chav Beis Shvat Tavshin Mem Ches to Chav Beis Shvat Tavshin Mem Tes. And there were about 520 girls. That means that in Mem Ches, approximately, or at least, 1,000 children. If there's 500 girls, there's 500 boys. Not everybody was named Chaya or Mushka. So it's say 1,000, and here's a few years later. That means that the Rebbe gets an average of 20 of these letters a week. My wife is pregnant. And that means that there were also births and upshares and bar mitzvahs and bas mitzvahs and engagements and chasanas and pregnancies. All of these different things that are happening, and it's Erev Rosh Hashanah, one of the busiest days of the year, and there are thousands of orchim come, and almost everyone brings some kind of zettel, but almost everyone brings another 5, 10, 15, 20 from all their friends. So the Rebbe has been receiving a lot of messages these days. And here's some Gedalia, a day later, and you'd expect a big executive gets that, even he looks at Tucker, he opens up himself, looks at it, okay, put this on the pile. The Rebbe noticed the exact detail about that was written, and had what to comment on the obvious mistake that the person had overlooked. This was the Rebbe, and today it's obviously Yatami B'Chayehi, without the Agbolos of a group, that the Rebbe is there with every single person. You don't see it, so when Mashiach is going to learn with Kol Ha'am Kuloi, 15 million Jews, and then all those who are coming down from Gan Eden after 3,000 years, so it's another 500 million, I don't know what the number is. And you can learn with all of them, and I promise you that every one of us is going to feel a direct personal connection. And today you can feel it by doing what the Rebbe is there. If we do what the Rebbe says, the part of the spiritual connection, the care, the individual specific care, even though it cannot be spoken out because it takes too many minutes, and everybody would have a 1 second yichidus every 75 years with all those people. So, what we can do is learn the Rebbe's Torah, including the Rebbe's Igdis, my personal opinion, and be Mekarev, another Yid, Mivtzoyim, or somehow or another, to think of Dira B'Tachtonim for somebody else. It's not just about my Gan Eden. And to have a direct connection, to write to the Rebbe, to go to the oil, and have a mashpia. And the Rebbe will help him. We should all be reunited because of Mamish. We're going to take a little bit of a break because of all the various activities that we should be involved in. Hopefully we're all involved only in the things we should be and not with the things which are not helping. But I had a call yesterday from a bocha, and the question was, what do I think would be the right, is it correct for people who are in Eretz Yisrael at the moment to lead right now. Talmidim, maybe Talmidos. This was a bacher who called. I don't think he was in Eretz Yisrael. But he asked theoretically, and so I'm not a Rav. I'm certainly not a Hasidic Rav. And each person should ask a Rav or Dafka, a Hasidic Rav who has a certain knowledge of the Rebbe's Toides. So whatever I'm saying is just lemedrish, v'loy lahalocha, but I want to tell you a beautiful story, which somewhere along the line I was planning to tell anyway. In my opinion, just judging from all the things that we've read and heard from the Rebbe, it sounds like the Rebbe says that Eretz Yisrael is the safest place in the world. And because the Eibishter is protecting it. We're learning the first pasuk in the whole Torah tells us that. And the Eibishter is still there, and the Rebbe is still there, and all the koiches and the brachos are there. But you could say nishtanu ha'itim. That's what I don't know. On the other hand, there was besides that, there's another reason. I just saw it in the last week or so. I don't remember if it was on some clip or if it was in a letter from Tashmul Lamadala, which I'm now in the middle of, where the Rebbe wrote about Al Yimas, V'lo Yimas, Levav Echov, in Pasha Shoftim, not to demoralize other people. That was another reason of it. What I told this bracha, I just said I have no answer. But I ask you a question. What do you think you should do? Go away and leave everybody else where they are, even the Chas v'Shalom if you thought it wasn't. Well, here's a story. In Tafshin Nun Aleph was the Gulf War. It began Elul Tafshin Nun approximately with the threats and the coalition, and the Rebbe was saying maybe hundreds of times that we saw on different gem videos and things, where the Rebbe said it's the safest place in the world. The Rebbe said it many, many times, and in many ways, and in many forums, and to many different types of people. I believe, if I remember correctly, the Rebbe even told someone came by dollars and said their child is learning in somewhere in the north, should they go to Yerushalayim? And the Rebbe said, no, that's not, it would look, because of what it would look like. Even within Eretz Yisrael. Now, here in England, there's a young man. It was a young man. He just recently, unfortunately, passed away quite young, maybe 60. His name was Murray Greenberg, Mayor in Makurov. He originally was from Liverpool. I don't know his exact background. He probably was traditional. And he was in Makurov, and he later moved to Edgware from Stamford Hill, for those who know the different neighborhoods. And and children didn't go to our schools, but he was always very close. And I'm telling you a story that happened then. He worked for the government here in England at 10 Downing Street. That's like the White House of England. It's a big building where the Prime Minister lives and where the main government offices are. He was a computer operator. In order to get this job, he applied, and he wasn't called for an interview for about 8 or 9 months after they just said, we got your application, we'll be in touch. And then it took about 9 months, which he found out that they were researching, because in that kind of a position, the person is exposed to all different plans or possible plans or definite plans of the government, which have political, economic, and military connotations, and it's top secret information, all of it. And you have to be afraid not only of an enemy, but of somebody who is not stable or someone who is vulnerable. They look and they checked in his kindergarten in Liverpool the reports that came there from 20 years before or 15 years before to see if there are any signs of instability. That's how much they did the research before he had an interview with 3 people, an interview for a couple of hours. And in the end, they asked him, what happens if you would see something on your computer which would be that's has a situation which is beneficial to England but detrimental to Israel. What would you do? Who would you side with? And he was a very honest, straight guy, and he said, I'm sure you will not put me into that kind of a position. And he got the job, and there he was, and once a year, in December, Dalton, by the Choga, Margaret Thatcher, she was the Prime Minister, she would come there. And then it came the Gulf War. And it was the middle of the war, and there were Scuds flying left, right, and center in Israel. Everyone knew it, but a non-Jewish person, it doesn't touch them directly. They know there's action going on over there. But he bought there's a Frum paper called the Jewish Tribune, put out, it's basically by the Aguda, but it represents all Haredi Jewry, supposedly. And it used to come out on Thursdays. It was a Thursday morning, and he bought it on his way to work, and he came into the office there in 10 Downing Street, and he had the Jewish Tribune under his arm. They didn't see him. He was a person, a Jew, not Jew. But they saw the word, the fellow workers, they saw it's a Jewish, they said, oh, you have our sympathies, you're Jewish. He said, for what? They said, what's going on there? All those bombs and everything. So he said the greatest rabbi in the world, a very holy person in New York, Rebbe, and he said that Israel is the safest place in the world. So the British understatement, they said, look, we respect all religion and all holy people and all nice ideas, but come on, realism. You're living in here, a world capital of London, and the safest place in the whole world is Israel. He said, that's what the rabbi said, and we trust implicitly in our rabbis. That was it. This is, let's say, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. About 10:30 in the morning, the IRA, Irish Republican Army, was a terrorist group fighting against the government, and they did many bombs in different places, but that day, they outdid themselves. They put a mortar in a truck, and it slammed into 10 Downing Street 1 hour later, to the extent it wasn't in the room, it didn't fall into the room. I don't think anyone was hurt, but it was a tremendous symbolic statement. But he said the computers in their room fell off the tables from the jolt, and they said, "Okay, we apologize." Suddenly they saw where you think you're safe, you're not safe. The Rebbe is to help. The Rebbe is to help. Shalu Shalom Yerushalayim. The Rebbe's capital, it's very apt, and the Rebbe's Zohafam is Zen Nisim V'Neflois. It should be is hapcha that every human being should focus on what they were created for, and then they'll become a Shamash Godel. They'll be helping us to be able to see this Galas of Mashiach Tzidkeinu b'Kariv Mamash.